Okay, so with the release of Immortal Empires, one of the big things that people are obviously interested in is importing mods over from Warhammer 1 or 2 into Warhammer 3. Now, first of all, if you're doing this and it's your own mod, you probably already have an idea of how to mod that, right? But if it is somebody else's mod and you want to do this, let's say you have a mod that you really like and it's no longer supported. A lot of times you will see on unsupported mods that it's open to whoever wants to start supporting it. But how do you do that? If it doesn't say that, though, you really need to go and get permission from the owner of that mod. Because, I mean, while technically speaking, we can steal each other's mods all we want based on the fact that it's not hard to do, you shouldn't do it because that's bad and you don't want to be a bad person, hopefully, in your life. So we're going to go through how to do that, not be a bad person, but to update a mod from Warhammer 2. So I have this mod that I made, but the process will be the same. And I'll also go over how this mod was made because a lot of times people want to add more units into the game and they're just really not sure how to do that. So I'm going to go over this mod. I'm not going to create it from scratch, but I'll go through all the tables and explain it all. And the reason I'm not going to create it from scratch is because I already have it from Warhammer 2, but also it would be a very, very lengthy video, and this is already lengthy enough. It's going to be lengthy enough. So let's start by opening the mod. Now, if we go to Rusted Pack File Manager and we select Warhammer 2, anytime I'm opening a Warhammer 2 game, I'm going to use the proper thing. The reality is you could open it with Warhammer 3 as well, but I don't want to do that just in case there's any weird things going on that I don't know about. So if we go to Open Pack File, now where your mods are going to be located is, for me, it's Solid State Drive, Steam Library. So it's in your Steam Library, Steam Apps, and it's Workshop. Now, if you look in content, you can, there's no rhyme or reason as far as I'm aware behind the naming conventions of the folders, so you might have to just play around with it a little bit. But if we go into, nope, let's try that one, no, okay, not in that, right? So again, let's try something different, no, all right, let's try something else. Yeah, this is a little more promising. Okay, so like no climate pack. So this is the no climate mod that I use. It's not mine, but you can always open it and you can see what databases this person used for their mod. Now this is actually Warhammer 3, so I'm sure it's not going to open it correctly because this is a Warhammer 3 mod, but you get the idea. You can see what tables they do. Now this is actually really a helpful thing as well. So even if you aren't taking over somebody else's mod that's no longer supported. Let's say you want to develop a mod that has aspects that other people have already done and you're curious how did they do that, like you want to do something similar to a mod you've seen, not the same thing but something that maybe you can tell probably uses the same tables. It's good to subscribe to their mod, take a look at what they have, and hey, if you use their mod as far as for inspiration or whatever, you can link it as well in your mod description and let people know that you did that. So anyway, what I'm going to do though is, since I own this mod myself, I am going to go to my personal mod, and that's going to be on my desktop. I keep all of my mods in their own folder, so I'm going to go over the Dwarf Rangers Expanded. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine this with my Recipe File Manager. I'm going to open up Recipe File Manager for my Warhammer 3 mod that I'm going to do with this. So the nice thing is, once you have a mod that you've already made, obviously you can just add the same tables and start doing the same data. Now, there are slight differences between Warhammer 3 and 2. So you can't actually just copy it over and run it. It won't run. Believe me, I tried that first in the hopes that, hey, maybe it would, right? So we're going to say new pack file. Now, what we do is we're going to right click on it and we're going to add from pack file. And we're going to go back to solid state drive, Steam library, Steam apps, common, Warhammer 3 data. And all of these tables are in the database. So I'm going to go through that. Essentially, I'm not going to show all of it, but I'm going to show the basic steps. We're going to choose data. And we're going to add each of these tables because I already know those tables are necessary. And if I need to add more tables later on, I do that, but I always have kind of a baseline. So, battle entities table. So battle entities tables right here, double click, that's now put in. And I'm going to go through and do that for all the rest of them, right? So once I've done that for all the rest of them, I'm also going to add the UI. So where UI is, this is the pictures of the characters. So these are the 3 units that I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a mod that creates a ranger, dwarven ranger with guns, so that you have 3 options for rangers, and then uh, 3 options for bugman rangers. So I have a bugman ranger with a gun and a bugman ranger with throwing axes. So that's the goal of this mod, and we'll go through that. So here are the 3 images here. This is also in data, and I'll show you that. It's going to be under data UI. So portraits is where all the pictures are for like heroes and lords. So I'm going to go to units, portraits, and icons, and here I can find it. So generally speaking, what I do is I just get like uh, an image. It doesn't actually even matter, but I usually just choose something that's similar. So in this case, like Ranger, and maybe Bugman Ranger, right? And maybe, oops, not Knight Errant, but Ranger. I'm double clicking here, Great X. Okay, so not that one. Right click, delete. All right, so we have like the Ranger, we have the Bugman Ranger, and we have the regular Ranger. Now what I do then is right click and I can extract these images. So I'll hit extract and I put them in a folder. In this case, mine's called screwing around. And once I do that, I can then edit these PNGs. And then once I am happy with the Photoshop editing, I then right click on the folder here, icons, and I add from file, and I go back to that screwing around, oops, screwing around folder and import that picture. So that's how I get all of these into the game in Photoshopped. So the big thing is try and sort of match the style. If you notice, like my ranger with a gun is just the ranger with a bow mirrored so that they're distinct. But then also I Photoshopped it to look like a gun so it doesn't look so much like a crossbow. Here I actually took in-game models of the models that I created and put them with the same background as the Bugman background so that they blend with the Bugman as well. And obviously, if you're better at Photoshop than I am, cool. So anyway, so that's all the images. Now, the other things we need for this mod to just be, well, to work, first of all, is we need the variant meshes, the variant mesh definitions. So I'll go ahead and do that. So if I right click, add from pack file, this is one that's not in the data.pack. It's going to be in variants. So variants pack or one of the other labeled ones. Usually it's this one. I always start there, but if I don't find it there, it's in one of the others. Variant mesh definition. Now, same thing as before. I usually start with something that's got a similar makeup of it. Now, I'm not going to create any new models as far as like anything on asset editor, like most of my mods, because I'm going to use the same body parts as the rangers so that they blend in with the other rangers. And I'm going to use the same weapons as other dwarf units. So I don't have to do anything there. I just have to create in variant mesh. So this is all going to be done on Rusted Pack File Manager or Photoshop for the unit icon. Okay, so I usually just choose like something like Bugman Ranger, okay, and maybe Ranger Great Weapons. Um, and then I'll do like a Thunderer, right? Okay, so those are kind of what I need to do a baseline. So let's say, let's take the Bugman first. Okay, there we go. So if we take a look at Bugman, basically it defines all of these variant meshes are generally broken down into things like head, body, legs. It depends on the model. But then it has like attachment points and equipment and all this other jazz, especially for like the blood for the blood god aspects like beheadings and stuff. That's what these like stump severed heads are and stuff like that. Then we have the props down here. These are their weapons that they're wielding. So let's say I want to make my Bugman with a gun, okay? So everything's fine, like the model is good. The only problem is that they're using crossbows. So here in prop 3 is the ranged weapon and they're using a crossbow. And here on prop 4 is kind of like I think the quiver, because this is the crossbow bolt. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our Thunderers and we're going to pull their guns. So here's weapon 3. I'm going to copy the variant mesh to slot. That's just my preference. And I'm going to get rid of variant mesh to slot, Control V. Well, actually, sorry, that's the quiver. So I'm going to do it here in prop 3. So now the prop that they're going to be using is a rifle. And then for prop 4, I'm not going to be using it. So I'm going to delete it. And I have to make sure that I put a / right here. Now /s are for unused props. Used props do not have it there. Something to be aware of. Again, that took me a while to figure out, and so generally what I did is I just chose a unit that's already in the game that had the same basic setup of like using a two-handed weapon or what have you. Okay, so this is now my Bugman Ranger gun, and so I can right-click, rename, and I would just change it over to something that I use for everything. So like Mass Mustachio underscore like Bugman or Bugman rifle or something like that. So essentially what I do is anytime I'm using anything referencing this character, so the Bugman rifle thing. So if I'm making a gun for the Bugman rifle, if I'm making the variant mesh for them, if I'm defining them, all of the things in my tables are going to be labeled the same thing: Mass Mustachio, Bugman rifle, or in my case, it's actually gun apparently. But and I'm going to do that for all of these. So again, if I name everything the same thing, so let's say this one is the like throwing axes, I would just say like Mass Mustachio, like Bugman axe or something like that. And then everything that is used for that character, I'll also name the same way. And that just makes it so I don't make mistakes on naming conventions later on when I'm doing that. So that is our variant mesh taken care of. Again, I'll do all of those as well. I've actually already done them, but you've now seen the process. Okay, so the last piece of information we need for this mod is going to be our text. Now you can find these texts, so this would be like the name of them and the short description, the short history. So we're going to add from pack file again, and in this case it's going to be local en, so that's English, but just depending on what language you're using, you might have a different one. And if you want to make it work for more languages, you'd have to do that. So local, and we're going to go to text database. And what we're doing is, in my mod, the only thing that I need is my land units. So land units describes the name, and unit description short text. That describes the unit itself. So land units on that, and short description, so unit description short text. Now, a few things to note about this, and they're the same between Warhammer 1 and 2, is that whatever you put in front of land units is fine. It won't mess with it, and you should change it. So in this case, Masked Ranger, that I will change all of my databases to be named that so that I can tell what this mod was for, and also so that it doesn't interfere with any other mods. But anyway, so anything before is fine. It's just land units.lock is the important aspect of it, so don't mess with that. Now, inside here, this is where the names of them are going to go. So we're going to generate the names. So land units on-screen name, they all have to start with that, but now notice after that, it's Mass Mustachio Ranger gun. Okay, now just to show you my other one here, okay, like it goes land units, in this case, concealed name. So that's similar to here. They have a concealed and on-screen name. Don't ask me why they have to have a concealed name as well. So just have a blank. But anyway, I have one for their actual name, Rangers, Rifles, and then their concealed name, it's blank. I do that for each of them. And notice I've named them Mass Mustachio Ranger Gun, Mass Mustachio Bugman Gun, and Mass Mustachio Bugman Axe. So I know exactly which one I'm describing. And again, I don't have to do it like, oh, Bugman Gun name or something like that. The same thing applies over with the Short description, it goes unit description, short text. They all start like that, underscore, and then you have the name, whatever name you want to call it. And you can see that over here with any other one. So Casket of Souls, here's the Casket of Souls one. So that's just the text. And again, it's not necessary for the mod to work. It's just necessary for your mod to not look like crap. Okay. Anyway, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open pack file. Now that I've just kind of gone through that, I'm going to open the pack file I've already made that has all these databases added with all the changes I've made. And I'm going to go through and explain them on how this mod works and also compare them to Warhammer 2 because they're not all exactly the same. The ones that are a little different, I'll point out. So otherwise, they're basically the exact same table. So you could pretty much just copy and paste them over. So battle entities table. First of all, I didn't need this battle entities table. These two are original vanilla character models. They are the Bugman Ranger and the regular Ranger entity. Now, entity is a really important table, and you can actually just pull entities from kind of other units if you want. You don't have to create your own, but it defines things like walk speed, run speed, acceleration, deceleration, movement, like how big they are, do they ignore, vegetation, stuff like that. All right, so it's an important aspect, but you can often use vanilla ones like I did in this case. So really, I don't need this table, I could delete it. The only reason I have it in is just so that I remember that the battle entities is a really important table. Okay, building units allowed tables. So here, this defines the buildings where you can hire the units. So basically what I did was I searched in the original content and I looked for unit rather than building. So I went over and I was like unit and I said Bugman, okay? And that brought up the Bugman Ranger from the original data. I've since deleted it. But the important thing is I saw all the buildings where the Bugman Ranger was hired in, and I made sure I had all of those buildings for each of my Bugman Rangers. Then I did the same thing for Ranger as well, and looked at which buildings hire normal Rangers and did the same. A few things to note about this table. This is where you hire them from. If we're talking about like additional buildings required, so if you think about Thunderers, so the Thunderers require not just the barracks where they're hired at, but also the foundry. And that is handled on another table, main units table, and it's over here, additional building requirement. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of. Now, the other thing to be aware of is that you need a unique key, and the unique key needs to be unique in the game to the building and unit. So notice Special Brewery and Special Brewery here are for the two different units. They have different keys. So the key isn't for the building, it's for this combination of building to unit. All right. Campaign map attrition unit immunities. Basically, I just looked at what do Dwarven Rangers have immunity to on the original table, and they have immunity to snow, non-vampire, and mountain. And so I made sure that each of my units, the Bugman Gun, Bugman Axe, and Ranger Gun, all have the same attrition immunities. But you can add any number of attrition immunities if you want. Okay, CDIR military generator. This is one of the things that was different. The actual build on itself is the same from Warhammer 2, but the qualities are different. So here, basically, I set these based on the vanilla like Quarrelers and Rangers and Thunderers and Bugman Rangers, and I use those as references for my personal units, and so I set the qualities there. But if you notice, the qualities for the original, and you can actually see Bugman, Rangers, Thunderers, Quarrelers, and Quarrelers with normal weapons, their qualities are single-digit numbers. And so when I made my Bugman, I had to make sure that I had similar numbers so that it wasn't too high of a quality. And this is, I believe, for just qualities based on like to determine the army quality and auto resolves and stuff. Not 100% sure, but I use this table. All right, now let's talk about land units table. And I need to plug in my headphone at the moment. Okay, sorry about that. It was dying. All right, so land units tables, we have our, this is an important table for describing kind of the stats of the character, what weapons they use, all kinds of stuff. Notice the key, Mass Mustachio, Ranger gun, Bugman axe. These are my modded units. The rest are just references. I'll delete them when I release it, but they're just like the Rangers, Thunderers, and Bugman Rangers, so that when I'm setting up the stats, I can follow them. And the land units table is different from Warhammer 2's land units tables. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a few differences. Namely, the biggest difference is near the end. They have like capture tiers and stuff, and so that wasn't in Warhammer 2. So if you were to just copy your table over from Warhammer 2 into this one, it wouldn't work. So that was one of my issues I was running into, where the game just wouldn't start. Now, if you notice, I named them Mass Mustachio, Bugman Axe. The short description is calling to Mass Mustachio, Bugman Axe, which was the short description one. So again, anything that's calling about that is going to be using it. The animations, I use the proper animations for, like, if they're using a gun or throwing axes. The armor, I didn't have to create my own or shield, because there's plenty of armors and shields in the game that already work for it. But you could make your own if you want to have it block at a higher rate or something like that. Now, the primary missile weapons, for the basic Ranger with a gun, I just use the Thunderer's gun. But for the Bugmans, because Bugman crossbowmen are better crossbows than normal crossbowmen, I did the same thing for the Bugman gun and Bugman throwing axes. And so I'll define that later in missile weapons, but we have named it Mass Mustachio Bugman gun, Mass Mustachio Bugman axe. Again, naming everything the same thing. Over here, primary melee weapon, same thing. I am using a specialty two-handed axe that doesn't already exist, so I need to make it. Now, because the normal Bugmen use just this axe, my normal Bugmen, but with guns, are going to use that same axe because it's a one-handed axe, so I'm just using the same thing. So I only had to create a primary melee weapon for the two-handed axe. Again, all of these are just kind of stat stuff and whatnot. The other difference between Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3 is the attribute group. In my original one, I just pulled the attribute group from the Rangers, and in this one, they're different. So they're just called different. So rather than having these attribute groups, again, I don't need to develop my own attribute group, but if I did, this is the table I'd use, unit attribute groups, group name would be where this is defined. And but I just copied the Bugmans into the other Bugmans and the Rangers into the other Rangers. Easy enough. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that table. Again, it's a pretty important table. It's the table that most often causes incompatibility between two mods. All right, at least in my mods with other people's mods. Land units to unit ability junction. Now, this is the abilities. Now, the only abilities that any of these units have is the ability of the liquid fortification ability. And so those things, how did I find that? Essentially, I just searched land unit for Bugman and saw which abilities they had. And here is the Bugman Ranger. He had this, so I gave my other two Bugmen that as well. The normal Ranger doesn't have liquid fortification or any other ability. The Rangers don't have those abilities. So I don't have to do anything for that. Again, I will delete this. It's just a reference. I use references a lot of normal units. Okay, main units table. We already talked about the additional building requirement, but let's talk about some other important things. I, again, utilized references, but this is the unit, this is the name of it. This is used in a whole bunch. This key is used in tons of different tables, as you can see. And it's important, like I said, if I just name everything exactly the same, then I don't get it confused of which table, like, does the main units key get used in this table, or does land units, or does variants get used? It doesn't matter, they're all named the same. So here it defines what land unit matches to this main unit key. Again, I just use the reference, but this is where you can determine your recruitment, upkeep, and multiplayer cost. I basically just use vanilla units as references and then did linear growth to do that. Again, already mentioned additional building requirements here. The other thing that's important to note is that you need to have a unique index, just like in your buildings one. The only difference is this unique index isn't that unique index. It's a separate unique index. So you just have to come up with something unique. I generally just create something that I know doesn't exist in game already and then do 1, 2, and 3. Anyway, porthole, just vanilla stuff. Nothing else super important here. Okay, again, just match something similar in game. So now let's talk about the melee weapon. As mentioned, I had to create a two-handed axe that was slightly better than the normal two-handed axe that the normal rangers used. But then so essentially what I did was I looked at the growth between the normal dwarf axe and the dwarf Bugman ranger axe and saw those changes and used those to anticipate the changes that I would need to improve the great axe to a Bugman great axe and just use it as reference. So mostly it's just stats are slightly better, but otherwise everything's the same. It's audio type is axe and axe. This is where you define a lot of things about the actual weapon itself. So does it do splash damage? Can it damage buildings, etc.? How quickly do you attack? All right, now let's talk about missile weapons. Now, missile weapons table is actually not as robust as the melee weapons. It's actually projectiles that do most of the stuff. So we'll get to that first. But the missile weapon defines the weapon itself, and then it defines what projectile it uses. Notice I named Bugman gun, Bugman gun. Now, the audio type is the actual audio of the gun, not the missile weapon. So a throwing axe doesn't make any noise when you throw it. It's the noise of the axe flying through the air, and that audio will be defined in projectiles. But when you shoot a gun, the gun makes a noise, and the bullets make noise in air. So this audio type is the gun's noise. You leave it blank if you don't want a noise. Again, you can use references from existing ones. So let's talk about the projectiles. This is the bread and butter of your missile weapon stuff. So again, I used references. So this is the normal dwarf. This is the Bugman's dwarf ranger. Here's the Thunderer's bullets, and here's the throwing axes. And so when I made my Bugman with a gun and my Bugman throwing axes, I made sure that I followed the same idea of like the same kind of differences in stats and then otherwise keeping it the same. So like a throwing axe has a spin type, it's axe spin. So again, I'm just using these as references. A few things to note here is like, really you just want to follow something that already exists in game. Projectile number would be like, is it a shotgun? So there are shotgun type units in the game. Use those as references if you wanted to do that. But basically, this is where the damage and accuracy and all this other stuff is affected. So marksman bonus here, for example, here's the normal ranger crossbow. Here is the Bugman ranger crossbow accuracy, so 10 to 20. So I generally do linear growth. Otherwise, it would be too aggressive of a growth, I think. And so I did the same concept between a Thunderer's gun and a Bugman Thunderer. So it's an increase of 10. Throwing axe to Bugman throwing axe, it's an increase of 10. Otherwise, I'd be doubling it, right? So it'd be 40 or whatever. Okay. So yeah, so this is where we have it. This is the display, what it looks like. And here's the projectile audio. This is what it sounds like when it flies in the air. All right, so basically you can take a look at that as well if you want to do that, but usually just start with a vanilla. All right, the next one, UI unit bullet point. So this is just a UI thing. It doesn't actually change any stats in game, but this is just when you look at a unit card, it gives those little bullet points. These are the bullet points. I just chose vanilla Bugman Ranger and regular Rangers and just gave to, say, the Bugman gun all of the same bullet points as the other one. Same thing here, all of them. Okay. Now, unit short text tables. All this is saying is the key. So this links main units to the actual text itself. So this is just necessary to do the link. And again, notice I use the same key I use on everything. All right, unit set to unit junction table. Now this is a big one. This one caused a lot of issues. Well, this is the one that actually caused one of the main issues when I finished my mod originally for Warhammer 3. I had just kind of copied over the same unit set to unit unit junctions from Warhammer 2, but there's actually a difference, and it's actually right here, multiplayer. They don't have this anymore, this multiplayer set dwarf. But basically what these are, and you notice this is all of them linked to my Bugman throwing axes. Essentially, this is just unit sets, and you can take a look at the vanilla dwarven units to get an idea of them, and that's what I did. But basically, if a technology or ability or something is linked directly to like, oh, this weapon increases all dwarf infantry. Well, or not weapon, but this like technology increases all dwarf infantry stats or something like that, then it's linked to this unit set. And so I want to make sure that my Bugman axe, who are also infantry, get that same bonus. And so this one here is like a great axe. So my Bugmen use a great axe. So I want anything that improves great weapons to also improve my Bugman axe. If you don't do this, your technologies will not improve your characters that you created. And again, I just look at the vanilla dwarven units and see which ones apply to my units. Okay. And I'll show you what happened because I had this one in here that shouldn't have been in that doesn't exist on the third one. There were several actually, but anyway. Okay, unit variance table. So this one again is just linking up different tables with each other. So here we have the same naming conventions I always use, which is Mass Mustachio Ranger Gun, Mass Mustachio Ranger Gun. So this links it to the land units key. This is the variance key that does some other stuff. And then this is the variant and variant name. The unit card is the actual image. So this UI, this table, this right here links it to this. So we have to make sure that the names are the same without the .png, obviously. So again, to keep things easy, I just name them the same every time. All right, units custom battle permission. I have a vanilla as a reference, but this is just in a custom battle. It doesn't affect campaign, but custom battle, the dwarves can hire my units in a custom battle so you can play with them. But I just made sure that I followed the same things as something similar. So is it a siege unit, attacker, defender, etc.? Is it a general, whatever? Units to grouping military permission. This sets these guys to be part of the faction in campaign. So the dwarves can hire these units. Again, there's a lot of other things that go into effect with hiring, but you still need this one. So again, the buildings, if you had the buildings allowed, but you didn't have this military group, you wouldn't be able to hire them because you're not part of that military group then. All right, variance table. So on the variance, again, I have some references, but the variance is a pretty simple table. The big thing is that it sets the low poly and super low poly for me. And so this, I just use references of other rangers so that I just use the same low poly model. Scale variation just makes it so that a unit of guys don't all have the exact same size. So it scales the model up or down plus or minus whatever percent you add. So this is 5%, so it's from 95% to 105% of the original size. All right, so that's all of those tables taken care of. Let's talk about the text. Again, you need an on-screen name and the concealed name, and you give it the name and you have it blank for concealed. The short text, same idea, you have the text in that, but you don't have the empty ones. So I don't know what's up with the names needing a concealed name, but they have them. All right, so the last thing to talk about, other than, like I said, here's our images, the last thing is the variant mesh. The variant mesh, as mentioned, already defines this, and I've already gone through all the guns, but just as just as a reminder, I just used vanilla ones. If I was using asset editor, as you've seen with other mods, a lot of times I just combine them all into a single thing, unless it's if it's like a single person. But if it's a group of people, this allows for randomization. So like head, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 models, head 1, 2, 3, 4. And basically when it generates a unit, each individual character in that unit will have a random one of these. And so they are all equally likely. So they're each 25% chance likely to happen. And depending on your graphics settings, you might see less. So if you set your graphics low, it will only do like the first 2, so it won't randomize as much. And also the max number of randomizations, if I remember right, is something like 5. So it's just something to be aware of. All right, so that is all of my my mod. And once I have that, I'll go through and delete all of the things that I didn't personally modify. And then I will right click and I will rename and make sure that all of these tables, because originally it's just data. So I always add this extra bit like Mass Mustachio Ranger to define so that I know which mod this is from. That way, if I ever also am running 2 of my mods at once, they don't interact with each other, because I used to name them all just like masked data, but then they interact poorly with each other. So you have to make sure that they're different. So once I started making more mods, I had to make sure that they actually are specific to that mod to ensure compatibility. Once you're good with that, you save pack file and you're good. Okay, and I'll go over that in just a second. But I want to point out something that I use that I haven't used before in a video, that Rusted Pack File Manager does, which is quite handy. As I mentioned, I had issues with the units set to unit junctions. So basically, I had the multiplayer, this thing right here, for example. So copy. So just to show you what happened, if I add row and I have this, basically this mod would not start then. Okay, so when I started the game, it crashed. It just wouldn't start. And it was like, oh no, because that's always a bad one. It's one thing when it runs, but you can see visual issues or whatever, then that's easy. But when it just won't start, that's a little harder to notice. But here's the nice thing is that if you go to view and you make sure that toggle diagnostics window is toggled, that's this thing here, this will help identify issues in your mod. So what you do is you say check pack file. Now it may have to generate a dependency here. I've already done it, but if you haven't done it before, you'll have to generate a dependency. It takes a little bit, but once it's done, it does it automatically. Once it's done, you can then check for errors. So if I hit this, check for errors, you'll see that error database, the unit set to unit junctions table has an invalid reference, and it's this. So that's a problem. So because I know it's a problem, I could delete it. And now there's no issue. And I can save my mod and go to Warhammer 3 once the game has been, or once my pack is saved. I can go to Warhammer 3. Oh, I should note one other thing. If we go to data, whatever the name of your pack file is going to be. Right now it's Andy, but I'll eventually have it named what I actually want to name it, which is Mass Mustachios Dwarf Rangers Expanded. We also have to have a PNG that's named exactly the same in your data file folder, and it has to be a 256 by 256 PNG. Once you have those two things, you can upload this to your workshop. You go to Mod Manager, and you go to like Rangers here, and you click on this folder and it will upload it to the workshop, where you can then change the name of the mod, add pictures, add a description. And that's all there is to naming this or to doing this mod. So hopefully that it was helpful for, how to, one, move mods over from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3. For the most part, they're pretty much the same tables, but there are some variations, so you just have to be careful and just be aware of that. But also how you can create your own units for the game. So hopefully that helps, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching.